Hey everybody, welcome to another Timeout with Tackle What's Next, where we chat with athletes and executives about how sport has changed or made a difference in the course of their lives and the skills they've learned in life after the game. I'm your host for tonight, Danielle Berman, the founder and CEO of Tackle What's Next, where we help athletes create impact outside of the game and find purpose in life after sports. We haven't done one of these in a while, so we're so excited to be back tonight. Thanks again for taking a time out with us here at Tackle What's Next. Today we are talking to Matt Rogers. Matt is a former swimmer and coach. He competed as an athlete in the U.S. Open for USA Swimming. He's now a recruiter for a financial firm out in New York, and he has trained countless individuals on how to reach their true potential both in sports and life beyond the game. I'm so excited to have Matt here. I'm going to go ahead and bring him on screen, and we will get right into it. Hold on one second, and we'll bring him on screen. Well, thank you guys all for being here. We're so excited. Hey, Matt, how's it going?
Good evening. How is everything? How's the technicals? You hear me okay?
I can hear you great. Thank you so much
Good.
for being here. We're so excited to have you on.
Sure. Absolutely.
Awesome.
Thank you. Me too. Appreciate it. How's everything tonight?
Everything's good. Everything's good. I want to just start off by having you tell us a little bit about yourself. I feel like everyone in the world has gone through a kind of crazy year and a half. So what have you been up to? You know, how's everything going for you into middle of 2021?
Yeah, definitely. Work has kind of been, the same usual stuff. Obviously, the last spring had a lot of something going on. We don't need to go too much into that. But other than that, it's sort of business as usual. Very obviously being right here in the center of it in New York. Haven't done a lot of on-site college visits or anything like that for my recruiting. So I miss that stuff because that's something I really enjoy doing. Getting back to it a little bit, at least making contact with some of those people again, which is great. I spoke to one or two recent grads in preparation for this to ask them what they went through over the past year. So I think that was really helpful for me. And, other than that, just trying to, reconnect with some of those college connections. I do a great deal of recruiting out of there, as well as mid-career people as well. So that's really what I've been up to. I've actually been, working in the city for over a year now. So
Wow.
A lot of people have been doing that, and the city is definitely crowded again. So it's you never would have. Except for knowing, you never would have known right now what's going on. So it's good
Right.
news.
Good. I'm glad to hear that, and I'm glad to hear that you're staying busy and things are coming a little bit back to a normal city life in New York there.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, I want to start right at the beginning. We always ask our guests on Timeout, what was your first sports experience? Like, what was the first sport you remember playing, and how did you get into swimming from there?
Sure. Well, we always were a beach family. So, my entire family, my cousins, my grandparents, they had cabanas down on Long Island. And so I grew up going to the beach, going to the pool. That's kind of where I didn't start seriously competitive swimming for quite some time after that. But I grew up playing, everything from baseball, soccer, basketball, tennis, swimming, all the way up until I was probably like 15 or 16 years old, until I got super serious with swimming itself. So, started swimming club, which is how, those Olympic type of sports go. They have high school teams and things like that, but generally, it's all about clubs and things like that, and sports like gymnastics and figure skating and swimming and, tennis, things like that, the individual Olympic sports. So I got into that, had a really successful career with that. Actually cut off my own competing. I still compete for fun in things like lifeguard tournaments and triathlons from time to time, but cut my, serious career off to begin coaching and finish up college around 19 or 20 years old. And, so have had, almost 20 years of experience coaching, being that I started doing that when I was 19. And ended my career, kind of skipped through all of that, but had a number of different, club coaching jobs and high school jobs, and finished my career off before I went into the corporate world over here in Brooklyn at a Division III school as the head coach, St. Joseph's College, Brooklyn, which was a great place to be a part of. The athletic director and the staff there was excellent. It's a very small school. I believe there's only about 1,200 students, 1,000 to
Oh
1,200
wow.
students. And he built the athletic program from around 60 or 70 athletes all the way up to 150. So,
Oh my
by the
goodness.
time he left and the time, he left there, he had grown the program by like double. And, 10 to 15% of the people on campus were involved in sports. And it was a really excellent, community to be a part of.
Yeah.
There's a lot of great Division III programs that I think that, get overlooked by people looking to, who are in high school to continue that. Maybe not on the top level, but I think a lot of people need to consider that. But that's probably another conversation. We can talk about that for hours.
No, it's a great point. I think there's a lot of different ways to compete, post high school, and if you're really trying to kind of continue with your sport. So it's great to hear that you had a great experience there. And I want to know a little bit about like what impact did swimming have on you? Like, were there moments that kind of shaped what you're doing today? Are there things that you've experienced because you were swimming or because you coached swimming that you feel like shaped you into the person you are now?
Yeah, probably some typical things. I don't know anything too specific. The typical things that you hear: a long day, waking up early, things like that. I kind of incorporated that into my life after graduating school. So, at my busiest time, I had a 1-year-old. I had 2 different coaching jobs that I was doing, 50, 60 hours a week, traveling, taking care of my baby. I had my own strength and conditioning company that I did for 13 years. And I was finishing up my last year of grad school in sports management. So that was like probably my busiest year time-wise. So just things like scheduling and everything like that is definitely a reason why a lot of companies are interested in athletes. In general, they know that they can do a long day. They know that that's just a mindset that they have.
Yeah.
So I think it's, it kind of checks a lot of boxes. You're surfing or fishing in a good pool when you look for college athletes. I just think you're looking at high quality individuals who have overcome challenges before on a tough schedule. You know what I mean? So I'd say that's been my experience. Pretty typical.
Yeah, no, it's great. I think you talked on a couple skills that, that swimming brought you, but, you mentioned owning a business and kind of getting involved in a number of different things, including going back to school. So tell us a little bit about what that experience of entrepreneurship, going into the corporate world was like. Were there a lot of more similarities from sports? Did you feel like you were prepared from your sports career, or were there things that you weren't expecting?
Sure. Yeah, to kind of start that off, I kind of just transitioned out of graduating school. I didn't really find any big full-time gigs that interested me whatsoever. So I got my CSCS and started to, continue to train athletes and regular fitness clients as well, but mostly athletes because that was the pool of people that I run with. So I continued to do that. I continued to coach. Coaching in a non-revenue sport certainly is not really a full-time gig in most areas of the country. So, it was having my hand in a lot of areas and just meeting a lot of people and, pretty much being self-employed, throughout that entire period between my business and between, coaching on the side and things like that. And just, I think that's the experience of a lot of people that stay involved in sports as a career. It's never you show up somewhere, you stay there all day and you go home on Friday. It's, you're all over the country even maybe. So, I enjoyed traveling with swimming. I was a part of a really great club team here on Long Island. And, we had the opportunity to travel. They put a lot of resources into the team to do that. They thought that it was important. So that was probably the best experience. I know that my kids who I coached, those trips are really the best experience from coaching, especially when you go away with a small group, maybe 5, 6, 7 people to that top level competition. It's something that's totally different in sports like tennis or swimming, where, you might only, you're not traveling with like 25 people all the time every day. Once or twice a year, you're traveling across the country with maybe like 2, 3 of your top athletes. And I think that makes those Olympic sports really unique. So that was the part I liked the most about it. Just having your hand in a million different things and, individual sports are great like that. And I think, that was probably the thing I enjoyed the most was those small trips.
Yeah, no, I think that's one thing that we've noticed a lot too is that there's a lot of synergy between the experience of being a student athlete or an athlete at a high level, right, Olympian professional, and juggling a lot of different things, being flexible, adaptable, and a lot of those skills translate into self-employment or entrepreneurship, working in business. So I'm glad that those things seem to kind of resonated for you as well.
Definitely.
And did you feel like you did something specific to prepare for that transition? Were there things that you were like, "Oh, I'm so glad I did this," or "I'm really glad I didn't do this"? Like what was that experience of like, okay, sport is no longer, I can't be a professional swimmer. Like what was that experience like, and what did you do, or what maybe did you wish you did to prepare for whatever was coming next for you?
Sure. So, I mean, I guess everyone has thoughts like that, but there are very few professional swimmers. I mean, there are very few professional anything, but that's changed actually a lot in the past 10 years with, different sources of revenue. But I was running everything from, like I said, I was training clients while I was still in school.
Mm-hmm.
I had my business going. I was doing, everything from swim lessons at people's, houses that had, large estates on Long Island and things like that. So, I was using the internet to get business in like the early 2000s. I was always out there working during school, which is kind of why I stopped competing. I enjoy working, and I enjoyed, building businesses and working independently and coaching. So, I mean, that's kind of how I got out of swimming, earlier. So it wasn't really a concern for me. I just kind of continued to do that, and now I didn't have to go to class anymore, and I could, I could have more time to devote to that. So it wasn't really a thought for me. I just kind of got into
Mm-hmm.
that, and nothing else piqued my interest to get into. Now a long time later, I have a family and things like that. Like the travel was probably the thing I enjoyed most, I was saying before. But then the travel when you have a family and you're a little bit older, that becomes a whole nother, it becomes the opposite. You don't want to do that anymore sometimes. So
Right.
that's how I got into, searching for corporate roles. And that's how I made that transition. Everyone says that I did it backwards, and that's the hardest way to do it. Because most people will work in some corporate role for 10, 20 years and be like, I hate this. I'm out of here. And then go start their own thing.
Right.
So no one told me that. So I sort of did it backwards. So no, there was no guidance
Right.
whatsoever. I just, that's the answer to your question.
No.
There was no thought about it, just get
Hey.
out there and keep trying to doing things that you like. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, that's a great point that you mentioned because I think that's a really interesting perspective of people were like, "Oh, you did it backwards, you did it wrong," and I loved your response of like, "Well, I didn't know there was a blueprint," and there's not, right? Like I think that's really important to highlight too. Is like there's a lot of different things to explore in terms of what you're going to do after sports, but I love the fact that you weren't really focused on like what's that dream job going to be, what am I going to do when I
Yeah,
can't swim anymore, can't coach swimming anymore. You were like, I'm just going to do like what opportunities are coming my way and explore those and see what happens. I think trial and error is such a big piece of the puzzle. So I love that answer, and I love that
sure.
example of like there is no blueprint. There's no like right way or wrong way. Like you could be self-employed and then go corporate or vice versa. Like however life happens for
Sure.
So I love
Definitely,
it.
definitely.
So we talked a little bit about kind of the skills you've learned from sports. I want to talk about the work that you've done both as a coach as well as, working in recruiting, right? This is all people business. You're
Hmm.
working with people, you're
Sure.
helping them reach their full potential, right? In the corporate side and in the coaching swimming side. What do you think are really important things for let's focus on the athlete side here.
Hmm.
Really important things for athletes that are thinking like, okay, I am sort of thinking about what's next for me. My career is kind of coming to a close, or I'm about to graduate, whatever those things are. How do you work with, or did you work with as a coach, and do you now as a recruiter? Like, how do you help people reach that full potential? What's your advice?
Sure. Rewind. You really need to be. This is one of the themes I talk about all the time. And when I was getting high school students into college, I think it helped me. Now it helps me explain it to college kids as well. So you know, you need to look and see what's out there. So a lot of people will go to a school and get into a major and just do it and not really know anything about the career or the background or what the options are for using that. I think that the business schools do a better job of it because a lot of the professors are actually in those industries and might just be a part-time adjunct teacher. So I think that the business schools, it's a little more structured. So if you're an accounting major, okay, you're going to get an accounting job, right? It's pretty simple. But maybe you're going to do that for 3 years in accounting and audit. And you're not going to do that anymore. Wouldn't it have been better if you got a little bit more real world idea of what that's about every day early on? I don't know if that's the best example because, though, like I said, a lot of those roles are pretty straightforward. If you go into finance, you're going to want to work in investments. There are many different roles within that, but it's more straightforward. Whereas if you're, outside of a business type environment and your major isn't job training necessarily, it's more academic in nature, I think that's where people run into a lot of problems. So getting out early in your college experience, the first year or two, find out what experiences, you can have with this background. I think that's something that people don't do enough. And you need to do that right. You need to do that right away. You should be doing that in high school. So that's number one. Start the process early. Ask people what, not just the information you're learning in a book, but ask people, what am I going to do with this? Who's going to value this information for me to do something for them or do something for myself? So you can go into business for yourself. You can, try to do something similar to what I did and, be self-employed. So you need to try and think about what all of those things entail and how you're going to get there. So ask more questions, find people who you can ask questions to. So a lot of college programs bring in alumni who are, 5 years out or something. They talk about what they're doing. A regular student doesn't have those opportunities, and student athletes take it for granted because their handlers, I call them, they bring all this stuff to them, and that's great. But you take it for granted after 4 years. You have a medical person, you have a trainer, you have a coach, you have an academic person, you have a student services and career person. Nobody has all this. And to them, it's normal. And then you leave, you walk out the door of school, and then you have no idea, you feel like, or a lot of, this is what people tell me, they have no idea what they're doing. They have all of these people and all these support systems. Once they leave that, it's like, oh my God, now what? So, how do we get ready for that shock to some people? And also, how do we discover so it's not a shock? So finding out this information early before you get out there, having conversations. Everybody talks about networking, but networking is just adding value or getting value from someone. So have those conversations. Ask them what it's like. Ask them, after 3 years, where does this go? Does this lead to something else? Am I going to get skills to get into another role, into another industry, or progress? So, that's kind of the big picture of what people in school need to be doing, is just discovering more and not just going to school and going through the curriculum and learning all these things academically, but, you don't want to leave and not know anything about where you're going, what you're getting into.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. And it brings me to another point that a lot of people say, find your passion and follow your passion. And I think for a lot of us, that can be hard to be like, well, what's my passion? What am I passionate about? So tell me a little bit about, I know you've talked a lot about, kind of things that people need to keep in mind when you're thinking about following your passion or that dream job. Tell us a little bit about your process around that and what folks tuning in now or listening to this later can take away from, your advice around the follow your passion kind of guidebook.
Yeah, sure. So first I'll go through, my recommendations, and then I'll go through an example. So,
Please.
You can read the meme world out there, this all career, little blurbs out there, and you hear follow your passion all the time. But what does that mean? It's not descriptive. It's not giving you any information. So there's a lot more to it. So number one, you should do something you care about or you have meaning to, or that you enjoy doing. Maybe that's the description of passion. But then there's other components. It's really the intersection of three things for me. It's the passion. What do you enjoy to do? Number two is it has to be something that you're good at. It doesn't mean you can't get better or learn skills in a new job or something like that, but you have to be good at it somewhat. And that's important and completely overlooked.
Yeah.
Number three is being in an environment that you excel in, whether that's having similar people with similar values or interests, or they like the same things. So that's another one that's overlooked. Another buzzword out there is company culture and things like that. It's one of those things that, it's not something you can discover till you get there.
Yeah.
So just being in an environment around those people. So those three things are the most important. What's the environment going to be like? Is it face-to-face client work? Is it, behind the computer, mathematical work? What is it? What environment? Are you going to be associating with people? Do you want half and half? So those three things, what do you want to do? What do you care about? What are you going to enjoy doing? And then, what are you going to be good at, or else you're never going to stick with it? And then last one is environment.
Yeah, those are really important. I think to your point, I think we really overlook the am I good at it and do I enjoy it piece, because we follow the shiny things, we follow the passion, we follow the cool. And I think sometimes, and at least my experience too, when I was coming out of school, I was like, what am I supposed to be passionate about? Like, what am I supposed to be doing?
Sure.
And I think a lot of times too, to your point, when you have so much structure as a student athlete, you're looking for like, what am I supposed to be doing now? Like, where am I supposed to go now? Like, I've had this game plan and now the game plan is over. And I think to your point, it's almost like you need to explore those options earlier. But for those that like you stepped off campus and you didn't really dig into that, it's not too late, right, to go in and do this exploration, because it really is just like getting to know yourself and your interests and strengths. But I love that you said like you have to be good at it to stick with it. I think that relates to sport too, right? You made it through sport, not because, you were the most talented person on earth, but because you were pretty good, right? You weren't bad at sport.
Sure.
You excel because you were fairly talented. Like you said, you had to do work, you had to put in the time, you had to learn the skills, but you started off pretty good. That's how you advance. So I think that's another point of like kind of putting career into that same lens of sport. It's like it's going to take just as much effort and hard work as your sport career did, but you also have to love it and be good at it and be excited to do the work too. Because I think that's a piece we don't, like if you don't want to do it, you're never going to put the time in. And I think that's the hard part that people come to realize is like, oh, I'm passionate about it, but I don't want to do the work. And that's where you see the disconnect,
Yeah, definitely. And the other thing is too, too many people are trying to create a perfect scenario. And that's just like a recipe for disaster. So I used to have this speech that I gave the parents of coaching young kids. And I used to say, you can put in whatever time. I want them to, do other activities. They're young kids. I want them. So that's okay. But you're gonna damage your kids. Not damage your kids, but I'm saying you're not doing the best thing for your kids when your expectations don't match what you're doing. That's disaster. Yeah. So as long as your expectations meet reality and what you're willing to do for it, you'll be okay. Because there's no reason that you can't find a career path or be self-employed or something like that and be able to do things that you care about outside of it too. So how many people go into a career and, they love what they're doing 24/7, they're making ridiculous money, they're this and that. So that's like kind of, it's unrealistic. I'm not saying don't try to do that, but how many people have the opportunity to do that? If a career or your past enables you to do those things outside of it in some way, like that's great, right? So, and that could be anything, whether it's, family time or friend time, or, being able to, who knows, maybe you want to take a job in Colorado because you love snowboarding. I don't know. It could be anything.
Right.
So
it could be volunteering, whatever it is.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
So you need to just put yourself in the right environment. And that goes back to knowing what a career is. So if you're going to go into, a sales career for a national company and they're going to be, dragging you all over the country, you might love that when you're 25 years old, and that might be great. But, is that going to allow you to do the other things that you find are important too? So it's just making sure your expectations, align with reality is important. And I think that's something that athletes are able to do pretty well already.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's a really great piece to kind of start to wrap us up here You talked a little bit about, kind of again, really matching those expectations up to reality, but also understanding that nothing is ever going to be the dream job.
Yeah.
It's very hard to get there. So just a kind of closing question for you
Sure.
is, if an athlete is listening today and there's one thing you want to tell him or her to do right now, let's say they're in school, they're a student athlete, what's the one thing you would want them to take away from this conversation? What's that most important thing they can start to do?
Yeah, definitely. I think everyone is not asking enough questions about, where they're going to go. And I started with that in the beginning. So get out there, find those people and ask them, what the lifestyle is like, what the growth is like, what is it an early career in the first 2 years in this career look like, what type of environment is it in this type of industry or what have you. I think those are the things you need to find out early, because you don't want to do that too late.
Mm-hmm.
If you're doing that in the early years of school, you're going to avoid a lot of issues. And all these things we talked about today change as well. So in 5 years, you could have something, and that's okay too. But just make sure you understand what you're getting into, I think and ask people questions about it is the most important thing. Most people just follow the system, like we were talking about before. They just, okay, do this, go here, get on this bus, drive to Pennsylvania, play these people, drive back. Like you're having all these people do this for you. Get out there and ask yourself, for yourself, some questions to people. That's definitely the most important thing for sure.
I love it. That's great advice, and we really, really appreciate your time, Matt. Before we
Thank
go,
you.
we want to ask, what's coming up for you, and how can people connect and follow, engage, if people want to reach out and connect with you? How can they find you?
Yeah, sure. So I have an Instagram here, right here. They'll be able to see it in the comments.
Yep.
That's connected to my LinkedIn page. That's really where I hang out the most. My business pages are all gone. That's a thing of the past. So I don't use Instagram too much in what I do now. But I have the account there so people can connect with me on LinkedIn. Happy to answer any questions there. My link is in the bio for LinkedIn on my on this page, on this Instagram page.
Awesome. Well, we'll be sure to make sure these are all in our notes as well and in the comments. Great. So people can reach out to you. But Matt, thank you so much for being here. It was a lot of fun to chat, hear your story, and thank you for all the advice you shared to everyone
Excellent.
tuning in now and those that will listen later. So we really appreciate your time, and thanks for being here.
Yes, thank you too. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you next time. Have a good night.
Bye, Danielle. Thank you.
Bye.